All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Now, on this particular broadcast, we wanted to do our review of the big fight in the ATL in Atlanta, Georgia this weekend between Gervonta Tank Davis and Yuriorkis Gamboa. We wanted to give our feedback to what we observed on Saturday, what the future holds for both fighters, specifically Tank Davis. We also wanted to discuss that for one night, the city of Atlanta was the capital of boxing, or I should say all eyes of the boxing world were on Atlanta, Georgia. And we have spent a lot of time in Atlanta, Georgia, and we know that Atlanta has potential to be a big fight city. And we'll discuss the reasons why we think that is, and we hope that this is only the first of many big fights to come to Atlanta. So just sit back. We're going to discuss the main event, but first I wanted to discuss a rather entertaining fight at light heavyweight between 37-year-old Jean Pascal and 36-year-old Badou Jack. Now, we've already done a slight biography on Jean Pascal when he had the upset victory over Marcus Brown. And definitely he turned back the hands of time, found the fountain of youth in that fight. So we're not going to go too much in depth about Pascal's resume. Just a quick overview. Pascal, 42 total fights, 34 wins, 20 KOs, 6 losses, 1 draw, and 1 contest. Now, versus Badou Jack, 27 total fights, 22 wins, 13 KOs, 2 losses, and 3 draws. Now, some notable names if you're a hardcore boxing fan, but if you're a casual fan just listening to Chin Check Radio, you can Google these particular fighters. In April of 2015, fought and won a majority decision versus Anthony Durrell. In April of 2016, and I'm speaking of Badou Jack, by the way, on April of 2016, fight was ruled a draw against Lucien Boot. However, Lucien Boot failed the drug test right after that fight, so the fight was ruled a disqualification, thus giving Jack a win. January of 2017, fought a draw versus James DeGaulle. In August of 2017, scored a TKO victory in the 5th round versus Nathan Cleverly to claim the WBA light heavyweight title. In May of 2018, fought to a draw with, at the time, the lineal light heavyweight champion of the world, Adonis Stevenson. Now, by lineal light heavyweight champion, if anybody who follows boxing is, if you trace the lineage of the titles, usually you'll start from this fighter, then this fighter will lose to this fighter, and eventually the belt itself will pass on. Now, through boxing politics, the belts have become splintered. So you have the WBA belt, the IBF belt, the WBC belt, then you have the smaller belts like the WBO. So if you follow the title lineage from who was recognized as the main champion, even with the rise of Sergey Kovalev, Adonis Stevenson was still the lineal light heavyweight champion of the world. And why is that? Let's go back to your recent history. Roy Jones Jr. was the lineal light heavyweight champion of the world. Antonio Tarver beat Roy Jones. Bernard Hopkins beat Antonio Tarver. Chad Dawson beat Bernard Hopkins. And then Adonis Stevenson beat Chad Dawson. Now, Chad Dawson lost the fight to Andre Ward, but that was for Andre Ward's 168-pound title, the super middleweight championship. So in terms of the light heavyweight lineal championship, and the lineal champion was Adonis Stevenson. So Badou Jack in May of 2018 fought to a draw, and in January of 2019 suffered a unanimous decision loss to Marcus Brown, where he suffered by a clash of heads, one of the most heinous and gruesome cuts you would ever see in boxing. And that's saying a lot. I've seen a lot of fights and I've seen a lot of bad cuts, and that cut was as bad, right in the middle of his forehead. You could almost see the man's skull from the cut. It was revealed that he received, I believe, over 90 stitches to close the wound up. It was definitely I would say definitely was a gruesome cut. If you go back and watch the Lennox Lewis versus the Vitaly Klitschko fight, which turned out to be Lewis's last fight in 2003, clearly, and I mean clearly, the cut that Badou Jack sustained was head and shoulders definitely a worse cut. So to come back from that, and you guys should go back and watch that fight, definitely he was bleeding. I mean, to say bleeding profusely is really not even doing that any justice, but unfortunately suffered a unanimous decision loss. So going into this fight, fighting for a version of the light heavyweight championship. Now, if you follow Jean Pascal's fighting style, you know Jean Pascal is very awkward. He punches some weird angles. He has a sudden rush attack where he just throw punches some weird angles. He's thickly muscled, and he has good pop, and his pop comes from the energy that he exerts on his punches. So not really technically sound. He gets by on his athleticism, throwing punches some weird angles, and kind of getting off first and being very aggressive. Badou Jack is more on the lines of your classic boxer. He's that guy who takes a few rounds to kind of collect the data that he needs to make his adjustments. Fights with a hand, like a basic hands-up style, throws a basic 1-2, good solid uppercut on the inside. So while Jean Pascal is your more athletic, stronger, throws punches some weird angles, not your conventional technical fighter, Badou Jack serves in that capacity of your conventional technical fighter. But the one thing that the announcers kept talking about, and I agreed, was that Badou Jack does have a tendency to start off slow in fights. So let's get to the action. First couple of rounds, I thought it was everything what the announcers talked about, in the fact that Jean Pascal was the aggressor. He was taking the fight to Badou Jack. I felt that Jean Pascal won at least 2 of the first 3 rounds. And that's solely because of just better work rate and more activity. And I felt that Jean Pascal was getting off first. He was throwing punches, landing a lot of punches, while some punches were blocked. But the fact is, he was throwing more punches and he was the more active fighter. So I clearly gave Pascal at least 2 of the first 3 rounds, and that's just based on activity. Now, in the 4th round, had a nice overhand right that you saw Badou Jack right leg go in the air, and he was damn near knocked across the ring. So now you have a 10-8 round for Jean Pascal on top of taking the first 2 out of the 3 rounds. So now at this point, Badou Jack is in the hole. But I was noticing that Badou Jack was starting to find his range, was starting to connect. And if you watch that fight, every punch that Jean Pascal threw had knockout written on it. And it appeared to me that his plan was to try to knock him out, and if he couldn't do it, try to win rounds based on activity. And Badou Jack started to make adjustments, was finding a home for his jab, was finding a home for his right hand. I felt a couple of times he clipped him with the right hand. Now, as the fight wore on, there was clearly a momentum shift, as the first half of the fight, if you include the knockdown, was won by Jean Pascal. In the second half of the fight, as Pascal started to tire, and I did say he was thickly muscled, the more muscle you have, the more oxygen that's required, and plus he's an older fighter. So stamina started to become an issue for Pascal that wasn't an issue for Badou Jack. So Badou Jack started to establish his jab, find his range, and almost land his right hand at will. Was trying to land his uppercut. I don't think he really landed it as much as he wanted to, but was definitely catching him with the basic 1-2, because as Jean Pascal started to charge in, he was able to time the punches, and as Pascal's work rate started to wane, that's when Badou Jack started to land his punches. Now, there were parts I felt by the 8th and 9th round, it looked like Pascal was almost out on his feet. I mean, he was ready to go, and a couple of times he was rocked by hard right hands. Now, what I had the issue with Badou Jack was there didn't seem to be a second gear in his attack. What I mean by that is, when he had Pascal hurt, I mean, clearly hurt when Pascal was backed against the ropes. And I understand he wanted to take his time and finish him, but I felt that kind of waiting to pick his punches, mixing up the body attack, while he was waiting his time to pick his punches, that was allowing Pascal to husband all his strength in order to launch a counterattack or to almost launch an assault, which is what happened. So when he clearly rocked Pascal a couple times or buzzed Pascal when Pascal backed against the ropes, and I felt that Badou Jack at that point should have maybe turned the gas pedal just a little bit. Don't stand directly in front of the guy. You hit the guy and move to the side. But him standing directly in front of Pascal, kind of picking his shots, that allowed Pascal to gather strength to start throwing punches out of the corner. And those things make an impression on judges. And I think fighters and fans tend to forget that, where the guy throwing punches, the guy being a more active fighter, even though he's not landing much of anything, it leaves an impression on judges that he is in fact landing punches and he is in fact forcing the action and making the fight. So, and I think both guys really try to go to the body. From all the advantages that the announcers said that Jack was to have by going to the body, I felt that Pascal was going to the body equally. So to me, it was a tale of two fights. Now, in the last round, clearly Pascal was dropped, and that might have turned the tide. That might have evened some scorecards. And clearly, again, Pascal was out on his feet. Again, I mentioned Pascal was ready to go by the 8th and 9th and the 10th round. It looked like he didn't have anything left in the tank. I mean, his parachute could not open. So it just seemed to me that at this point, the fight was there to be taken by Badou Jack. But for some reason, he just couldn't step on the gas pedal. He just didn't have that second gear to really try to finish Pascal. While I thought, again, when he was trying to pick his shots and take his time to finish them, that allowed Pascal, because again, he fights in bursts. He's a very energetic guy. He fights in bursts. Then he goes into a bit of a shell, recovers his strength, fights in bursts. So that's something that a lot of older fighters deal with, where you know how to, quote, breathe in the ring. You know how to preserve and conserve energy in order to expend it at the times where you need to expand it. So I felt that that's what hurt Badou Jack in that fight. And if you look at it, those other fights that I mentioned are a result of kind of the same thing. Starting off slow, eventually picking the spots, and really not finding a second gear. So knocked down in the 12th round, you feel that could have evened up some of the scorecards. But when it was all said and done, it was a split decision victory for Jean Pascal. I don't have an issue with the scorecards. I thought it was a great fight, a contender for actually Fight of the Year, or a candidate for Fight of the Year. Should there be a rematch? Yes. My heart goes out to Badou Jack. Clearly, he was disappointed by the result of the action. It seemed to me that Jean Pascal was kind of tiptoeing and sidestepping the question when Jim Gray asked him about a rematch. But I was very impressed with the fight. I thought it definitely was the fight of the night. Definitely a great fight. Two evenly matched fighters, both a little bit past their prime. One is the aggressive action guy, one is a pure boxer. So definitely my hats off to both guys for giving us a very entertaining fight. And just for Badou Jack, he needs to, I believe, step up a little bit more. And I used to hate when a fighter would say, well, I won the last couple of rounds. Well, you also have to win the first rounds, because in boxing, yes, you can try to knock a guy out, but it's a point system. So every round matters. So you cannot waste the first 4, 5, 6 rounds, and then all of a sudden you sweep the last couple rounds and they hope you win the fight. And I think that's what happened. The judges clearly gave Pascal the first half of the fight, including the knockdown. So based on the scorecards, if you were to interpret them as I interpreted them, two of the judges, they looked at it as where it was too big of a hole that Badou Jack dug himself by starting off too slow, which has been an Achilles heel for him throughout his career. So not upset about the decision. I was happy that we got a very entertaining fight, and hats off to both men for giving us a great fight, and we hope that they're able to do it one more time. Why not even do it in the city of Atlanta? Now, which brings us to the main event. Gervonta Tank Davis, at age 25 years old, 22-0, 21 KOs, with a knockout ratio of over 95%. So that should tell you something. A notable, well, we're going to get back to a notable fight on Davis's resume. Yuriorkis Gamboa out of Cuba, age 38 years old. So we have a 38-year-old versus a 25-year-old. And there's always a whisper in Cuba, or a rumor in Cuba, that a lot of the Cuban fighters are actually older than what the birth certificate or what the paperwork actually says. So he's 38, and by boxing standards, he's definitely up there in age. And rumor has it, with the Cuban fighters who defected back then, he might even be older than that. Now, physically, Gamboa, he still hasn't looked physically, but clearly is a shell of his former self. So Gamboa, 30-2 with 18 knockouts. His resume includes, in September 11th of 2010, he defeated a fighter by the name of Orlando Salido. Now, if you guys don't know who Orlando Salido is, he 2 times defeated a young Puerto Rican fighter named Juan Manuel Lopez, or Juanma. Now, for those of us who follow boxing, when Gamboa was coming up through the ranks and Juan Manuel Lopez was coming through the ranks, that was a big fight that everybody was hoping for between Lopez and Gamboa. And at the time, Lopez was seen as the next big Puerto Rican star, following the great Felix Trinidad, following Miguel Cotto, Ivan Calderon. The next big star out of Puerto Rico, or at least people thought, would have been Juan Manuel Lopez. Getting tongue-tied. And that fight didn't happen. Orlando Salido also beat probably the top pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Vasily Lomachenko, in his second fight by a split decision. So that kind of makes you wonder, who do you give more credit to in that fight? Orlando Salido or Vasily Lomachenko? Because that was Lomachenko's second fight and only lost by a split decision. And since that point on, Lomachenko's been off to the races and really hasn't even been touched in fight since. So Gamboa has a victory over Salido. Then his first loss came in June of 2014 to Terrence Bud Crawford in the 9th round. And that fight was a very entertaining fight because Gamboa was moving up in weight. And you can make an argument that Gamboa won the first maybe 4 out of 5 rounds. Then while Terrence Crawford made his adjustments, i.e. switching to southpaw, at that point the tide had completely turned and he was able to knock Gamboa out in the 9th round. And that fight versus Gamboa actually put Terrence Bud Crawford on the map, that really made people take notice to who he was, to beat a name like Gamboa. So the stage was set. Now, on a side note, Gervonta Davis is promoted by Floyd Mayweather Productions or the Money Team Productions, or whatever team that's affiliated with Floyd Mayweather. Yuriorkis Gamboa at one point in time was being promoted and managed by 50 Cent. And at the time when Gamboa signed the contract, it was supposed to be a business deal between 50 Cent and Floyd Mayweather. Due to a falling out, failed friendship, clearly guys who were once best friends on HBO 24/7 are now enemies. And it wouldn't surprise me if being petty or taking a shot to 50 Cent is why Mayweather would want to sign his young stud versus a fighter who used to be promoted by his former best friend. Now again, that might not be true, and maybe I'm just reaching here. Maybe I am looking too much into conspiracy theory, but I wouldn't surprise me if Floyd was being that petty about signing his young stud to fight against 50 Cent's old fighter. So just kind of throwing it out there. You can read into it how you may. Now, the fight itself, people who follow boxing know that on paper, Gamboa is not the same fighter versus a young up-and-coming stud that Gervonta Davis is. So, moving up in weight, fighting for the 135-pound belt, the lightweight title. Now, Gamboa on the weigh-in on Friday came in 1 pound overweight. Now, how in the world, if you're moving up in weight, are you coming in overweight? So now that goes into what is in your preparation, how is your diet, how is your discipline, how is your training, are you partying enough, was he busy promoting the fight where he wasn't training? So that's kind of an issue. And like I was telling a buddy of mine, this is not the first time that Tank Davis has had issues with weight. If you go back to the undercard of the Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight, in August of 2017, he was 2 pounds over the limit when he fought Francisco Fonseca. And because he came late and because he wouldn't lose the weight, he was stripped of his title, and I believe the IBF title, that when they fought, Fonseca would have won the title, and it was a KO in the 8th round. that was kind of seen as kind of controversial because he struck the guy in the back of the head. And so I remember fans booing in the arena. I remember the sports bar that I was watching the fight at, fans were booing inside of the sports bar. So clearly there's an issue when you've done this twice at age 25 years old, where, of course, we all remember when we all were 25 for us old folks out here. 25, you can kind of get away with kind of mortgaging your youth, so to speak, not kind of pushing yourself. You can get away with that for so long, but eventually, as your physical gifts start to erode, now that work ethic that you had when you were younger, it'll pay off when you get older, when those physical gifts are not the same anymore. So Tank can kind of get away with this now that he's 25 and really hasn't even hit his physical peak yet, but I hope it's something that he can try to correct and rectify as he progresses throughout his boxing career, because the kid does have potential. Now, going into the action, clearly speed, power, youth was all in Tank Davis's favor. Now, in the second round, he scored a knockdown and a short little left hand on the inside that dropped Gamboa. Now, immediately afterwards, you saw Gamboa had problems walking around. Gamboa had issues moving. There was clearly something wrong with his right leg. So clearly there was something wrong with it. Goes back to his corner. They had the interpreter who was interpreting that, it was an issue with his leg. He couldn't continue. It was an issue with the shoe. So they were talking about there might have been a shoe malfunction where the foot kind of busted through the shoe. Boxing analyst Paulie Malignaggi noticed that, yes, that the bottom of Gamboa's foot was actually coming out. So now the question is, why wasn't the action stopped to get another shoe? Did they bring another shoe with them? Because in the past, when there's been a malfunction with the glove, they put a new glove on the fighter. So there was kind of confusion as to what was going to happen with the shoe. So apparently they taped the shoe up, but it was clearly still an issue with Gamboa's legs. Now, clearly Gamboa is not the same fighter that he was when he was young. And you felt that at any time that Tank could have ended the fight. But then this goes back to what I just talked about his preparation or possibly lack thereof. Where there were times in the fight where he looked exhausted. I mean, mouth wide open. And again, it looked like he, like Jean Pascal, every punch he had knockout written all over it. He clearly is a power puncher. But what happens to power punchers, and history is on my side of this, what happens to power punchers is you start to neglect training, you start to forget about your fundamentals, and now you start relying on the knockout punch. The problem is you're not going to be able to knock everybody out, and when you cannot do that, what is plan B? So there were times in the fight where Gamboa was hanging in there. I give Gamboa all the credit in the world. Gamboa was hanging in there. He was trying to go toe-to-toe with Gervonta Davis. I felt that Tank, he could have gotten him out of there much faster. But definitely Gamboa, I thought, showed a former champion's heart by not quitting, by sticking the fight, by taking hard shots. I mean, trying to move his head, doing the best that he can. But it's one of those, the mind is telling you to do it, the heart is telling you to do it, but the body, it just can't do it. So again, there were times because of, I think, Tank's bad cardio conditioning, his mouth was wide open, he looked exhausted. He too was able to fight in spurts, trying to collect his energy, and it was able to fight in good spurts. And in the 12th round, caught him with another good, I believe it was an uppercut, dropped Gamboa, and I thought the referee did a great job and kind of gave Gamboa a look, and he immediately waved the fight off. So definitely a KO victory for Gervonta Tank Davis. All the credit in the world for that. Now, whoever is his people, and Tank, my young brother, if you're listening, let's get you training. And then one thing I am proud of him, and I'm proud of you, Tank, is the fact that you owned up to not having your best performance due to poor training. So that's much respect there. You hear a lot of fighters, especially young fighters, they won't ever admit to that. So for him to be a man and say, I take my responsibility, I give myself a C+ on his performance, because he knew that he didn't prepare the way he should have prepared. And that possibly had to do with getting caught up in his celebrity, because he is a charismatic star. He has a look, he throws the punches, he knocks people out. He made Atlanta the capital of boxing for one night. So it's something that I hope that he can recognize it and be able to improve going forward, because if he's going to be a lightweight, now you got the guys like the Devin Haney's of the world, you have Vasyl Lomachenko, so you can't come in that kind of shape 1 pound overweight against these guys because you're going to have issues. So definitely for Davis, there's going to be some good fights on the horizon. I know I'm looking forward to it. Tank is he's definitely exciting. He definitely has the charisma. He definitely has the potential to be a star. His affiliation with Floyd Mayweather, it gets an exposure that other fighters really don't get. So I believe he should take advantage of that. But at the same time, he needs to put the work in. So I don't want poor training habits to derail his career. He definitely, big fights on the horizon, again, with the Lomachenkos and the Devin Haney's, and if he chooses to move up to 140, it's, a talent-rich division there if he makes it to 147. So the sky's the limit for Tank Davis at 25 years old. Again, he's not even hitting his physical peak just yet. So definitely impressed. Definitely kind of let's tighten up on that work ethic a little bit, because if he can tighten up on his work ethic and at the same time even work on his fundamentals and not worry about the knockout so much, he definitely is going to be hard to beat. So I expect big things out of Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, as discussed earlier, Atlanta for one night in 21 years had the eyes of the world was fixed on the city of Atlanta. And again, the last fight that they talked about was Evander Holyfield defending the heavyweight championship of the world against Von Bean. That was back in, 1998. And another big fight that I remember watching as a child growing up was Evander Holyfield versus a guy by the name of Smoking Burt Cooper. And in that fight, I remember because Holyfield was a champion, was a defending champion, won us a fight in the city of Atlanta, and I remember Burt Cooper got the fight in a reasonably short notice. And I remember they had the cameras and they showed where they gave Burt Cooper a call, and Burt Cooper said, "Yeah, I got the fight. Okay, great." And he fought the fight, and Evander Holyfield went in there, instead of boxing Burt Cooper, started slugging Burt Cooper. In that third round, Burt Cooper caught Evander Holyfield with a quick overhand right, and Burt Cooper had a funny way of defense where he would use a cross-arm defense, kind of in the mold of a Ken Norton. And the name Smoking Burt Cooper came from the late, great Smoking Joe Frazier. So using cross-arm defense, Holyfield kind of fighting Cooper's fight on the inside, gets caught with a right hand and gets dropped in the third round. Now, Holyfield's recuperative powers, i.e. Wolverine, is in that same round when he dropped Holyfield came back to actually rock Burt Cooper, and that's actually one of the greatest rounds in boxing history, because to score a knockdown and to get up and to rock the guy back. And I remember in that fight, Holyfield started landing an uppercut, and if you remember Burt Cooper, short, stocky, thick neck, and I remember just seeing his head popping up. And I remember watching that fight, I said, oh, okay, that's what an uppercut is. And which is funny, I remember getting into a fight with a friend of mine, and he was bigger than me, and we started fighting. I remember I thought about that fight, and I started uppercutting the life out of him. So definitely that's why I learned how to learn about an uppercut, was watching Evander Holyfield use one against Burt Cooper to eventually win that fight in Atlanta, Georgia. So with Atlanta itself, now if you look at major cities, major boxing cities, you have New York City, you have Los Angeles, you have Las Vegas, and I believe in Los Angeles you have the Staples Center, you have numerous events in Vegas, and you have Madison Square Garden in New York City, and as well as the Barclays Center. Obviously, Showtime hosts a lot of fight in the Barclays Center. If you compare Atlanta to all those aforementioned cities, Atlanta has just what all those cities have. Atlanta is a big city with a major airport. If you're familiar with just downtown Atlanta, you have the Omni Hotel, you have the Sheraton Hotel, you have the Westin Hotel, you have the Marriott Marquis, you have the Hilton. So, and those are just the big name hotels. Not even talking about the Ritz-Carlton, and you have the Four Seasons that's further in the Midtown area, and the smaller hotels nearby. So Atlanta has a boatload of hotels, and that's just in the downtown area within walking distance from Phillips Arena. Now, If you step out of Atlanta, you go up to Cobb County near the Smyrna area, which is really only 15 minutes away from downtown, there's a boatload of hotels there. If you go near the airport, there's a boatload of hotels there. So Atlanta would have numerous places to see because they just hosted the Super Bowl this year. So clearly hotels really are not an issue in Atlanta if you can host a Super Bowl. Also, Atlanta has not one but two major venues. Now you have the Phillips Arena where the fight was, and you also have the new Mercedes-Benz Dome, or the stadium. I know people get mad at me when I say dome or stadium, but the brand new place where the Falcons play. And to me, if you wanted to put a major fight like a Mayweather-McGregor fight, a Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 2, you can put that fight at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and it will fill. So again, Atlanta you have a one central airport, boatload of hotels, well-known city. There's always something to do in Atlanta. Even this past weekend, you had the football game, and you had the fight. So there's always something to do in Atlanta. Atlanta, what they say in New York is a city that never sleeps. Vegas is always something jumping in Vegas. Always something going in LA. There's always something going on in Atlanta. Atlanta's known for a strip club. So when the fighters and the entourages come in town, they want something to do, they can go to the strip clubs in Atlanta. And there's too many to name. You have your clubs in Atlanta, so you did your hangout, your after parties in the downtown area, in the Buckhead area, in neighboring towns, your Sandy Springs and your Roswells, over there near the airport, your Fairburn. So there's definitely a lot to do in the city of Atlanta. So what also makes Atlanta a great fight town, times that I have been in Atlanta, when I have watched a major fight at a sports bar. The sports bar, it is packed from shoulder to shoulder. For those of you listening who used to watch a boxing match at Barnacles, you used to walk into an old sports bar at Barnacles over there on Jimmy Carter Boulevard. Now, I don't know if it's still there, but you would walk in and it would tell you it's a $10 fee, $15 fee, and a $20 cover charge. You'd walk in there, and maybe by 10 o'clock when the main event was started, it was standing room only, to the time where I would get there early. And I would, people come up, hey, are you sharing the table? Yeah, brother, grab a seat. So I'm sitting at the table with total strangers and people standing up behind me, and we're all sitting back just enjoying the fight. So Atlanta, and why is that? Atlanta is a transient city. A lot of people who are in Atlanta are not from Atlanta. So you have people from New Jersey like me who love boxing, people from New York, people from Florida, people from Texas, people from California, people from Pennsylvania, people from all over the country, quite frankly, all over the world, who are in the city of Atlanta who enjoy the sport of boxing. So when a fight comes, and maybe we can't be in New York to watch a fight at the Garden or to watch a fight at the Barclays Center, we're not in Los Angeles to watch a fight at the Staples Center, or we're not in Vegas, we will find the nearest sports bar to watch a fight, whether it's Hudson Grill, Taco Mac, and name any of the sports bar that you can think of. People will find it if there's a fight. And I watched the Errol Spence fight at a sports bar that I talked about this on previous broadcasts, the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury fight, the Deontay Wilder versus Luis Ortiz rematch. I watched that at a sports bar. And again, the sports bar was packed. So in the city of Atlanta, the fact that it is a transient city, people from all over America and all over the world bring their love and their passion for boxing, and they love fights. So I guarantee you, if fights come to Atlanta like it was pretty packed in that Phillips Arena, if they start bringing more fights to come, folks will come. Trust me on that. At my former boxing gym, and these guys would fight local fights at my old boxing gym, the guys I actually trained with, and these were early professionals. It was packed at your center stages, at your Westin hotels downtown. It was packed at, what's the other place, the World Congress Center. It was packed there too. So I was happy and proud that for one night, Atlanta was able to host a major boxing event. I hope that this is the first of many. I hope that the promoters and, obviously Floyd and Al Heyman, and I hope that they see the value in the city of Atlanta. Definitely, if you hold a fight in Atlanta and it's a good, credible, quality fight, folks will come, because clearly folks came for Gamboa, who's more of a name, and Davis, who's really more of a prospect, if you really think about it. He's not really there because his resume is not really but Davis, by definition, is an up-and-coming prospect, while Gamboa is a gatekeeper, while he's really a name. So, and you were able to bull that kind of crowd. You were able to have that kind of excitement for that kind of fight. So can you imagine if you bring a bigger and a more marquee name fight And I guarantee that arena will be sold out, sports bar will be sold out. So I was happy that the city of Atlanta was able to host a major boxing event. I hope we don't have another one in 20-something years. And trust me, to all you fight fans and fight promoters out there, if you're listening, bring more fights to the Atlanta area, and I promise you, you will have money in your pocket, because people in the city of Atlanta love boxing and they love combat sports. So this is Chin Check Radio. Sign off until next time.